All right, let's get into the Word. One day, when I was 23 years old, the phone rang. And on the other line, I'd only been a Christian probably about 6 months. And on the other line was the youth pastor at our church. And he asked me if I would be willing to help him start a junior high ministry, which we did not have. And I thought, well, I can help. I respected this guy, and so I thought, fine, yeah, I'll help. And so I showed up that first day, and just the first day I pretty much just watched. And of course, the next week I didn't realize this. It was all dumped on me, and he didn't even show up. But it's amazing how my life changed because of that one phone call, and because I said yes, and I just showed up, and I got involved in ministry. And the whole course of my life, getting involved in ministry defined who I was a Christian. It defined my walk with God. That was 35 years ago. And I wouldn't be nearly the person that I am or have had, the wonderful experience that I've had with the Lord if I hadn't have got involved in ministry. And I have seen that same scenario take place in the lives of hundreds of people. Now, why is that? Well, if you turn with me, we're going to look at Mark chapter 3, verses 12 through 14, and we read this. And he, that is Jesus, went up on the mountain and summoned those whom he himself wanted, and they came to him. Now get this. And out of all those who followed him, he selected 12, so that they would be with him, and so that he could send them out to preach. Now, it says Jesus chose 12, and he had a purpose. In fact, he had two purposes in choosing them. He first chose them, let's keep that up there, so that they would be with him, and so that he could send them out to preach. He chose them so they could be with him, they could be in fellowship, they could share love that would be transforming, and they could grow together. And second of all, so that he could send them out. And so he chose them first for fellowship and second for mission. I want you to say that. Fellowship and mission. Two very important words for you. Now, when Jesus chose these first 12, all of them together, if you will, were the first Christian church ever. You could think of them as the first home fellowship. They were the first cell of what was to become a body, the body of Christ. It was like, if you will, the zygote in which the whole genetic material, genetic message, genetic code for what was going to happen would take place. It was, if you will, the prototype for every Christian and every church in every continent or time, the prototype for every denomination. In that first cell was a genetic code for you and me and everything else that would come. And what do we find in that genetic code? We find out that he chose 12 in order that they would be with him and that he could send them out. See, he took these 12 and he made them into a spiritual family. And just like in Genesis, this spiritual family came together with the power to be fruitful, to multiply, to fill the earth, and to subdue it. So just like that blessing and power was given to Adam and Eve in the natural, it was given to the first spiritual family in the spiritual, as long as that genetic code would be passed on. Now, God's plan to grow, to protect, to nurture individuals is a family. That's where people grow and develop. Now, in the natural, in the physical, in the intellectual, we know that growth and all of that takes place in a family. The better the family, the better the growth. And we know what happens when youngsters and people don't have good families. And it's the same in the spiritual. Spiritual growth is meant to take place in a spiritual family. And when Jesus calls you to himself, he calls you into a spiritual family. It says that he chose 12 to be with him. You see, he knew what it was like, what it would take in order for these men to be transformed into his image and to grow into maturity. He knew that it would take the support. He knew that it would take the encouragement, the interaction. He knew they would have to be annoyed by one another and forgive one another, and that only in that context could they grow. As they interacted with one another under his supervision and guided by his word. The only way they were going to come into maturity is to be a part of a spiritual family where they had to work things out, love, encourage each other, challenge each other under his supervision, guided by his word. How many know things don't change? That's still how we grow today. See, a spiritual family is the matrix and the support system in which you can change and in which you can grow into spiritual maturity. Do you know Christian growth cannot be a private pursuit? Any more than marriage can be a private pursuit? Any more than having a family can be a private pursuit? Do you know that you can't live the Christian life in isolation, in emotional isolation, any more than you can play the game of football by yourself? God calls you and I, when we get saved, He calls us to be more than an audience. We have a lot of churches. We have a lot of large churches in San Diego. It's easy to sit in a chair and to look at the back of a head and to hear some good music and maybe to hear, a religious lecture. But God calls us to be more than part of an audience. He calls us into spiritual family. Now, we like to think of our church as a family of families. We have 48 home groups for adults and 37 small groups for teens. And each one of these functions like a spiritual family, where you are encouraged, where you are supported, where you are challenged, where you are called to serve. And in all of these contexts, guess what? People grow. And there's other small groups besides that take place here at the church. Now, if you are passive, listen to me, you will never be part of a spiritual family. If you sit around and wait for everybody else to take the initiative to reach out to you, to invite you, to call you if you don't show up, if that's your attitude, guess what? You'll never really know what it's like to be part of a spiritual family, because that's not how it works. You must take the initiative. I want to tell you, I'll bet you that if you're married or were married, I bet that didn't happen because you just sat around and thought, I'm just going to wait until someone walks up to me and asks me to marry him. I'll bet you took a little more initiative than that. I bet you tried to meet new people. I bet people introduced you to people. You probably went out on dates. You probably made some adjustments, because that's what it takes to be a part of a family. Now, here's the truth. You need to be part of a spiritual family. Therefore, it's up to you. It doesn't do you any good to make excuses and to say, well, I went to that church, they weren't very friendly, nobody invited me out, nobody invited me to a small group. In the genetic code from the beginning, in order to grow, it takes two things, and one of them is you must be a part of a spiritual family. So it's on you, and it's your responsibility to reach out to others. If someone's not reaching out to you, you reach out to them. If no one's calling you, you call them. Some of you have been around a long time and you look around and you're feeling like, you know what? There's more and more faces I don't recognize. Then why don't you reach out and invite somebody? There are people that need you to reach out to them and befriend them. Now, if you look in your bulletin, we have a list of these 48 home fellowships. And they have phone numbers on them. Now ask me why they have phone numbers. It's so that you can call and go visit a home group and reach out, because you need to. I need to. We need to be part of a spiritual family. Now, fellowship is important. It's necessary. But it's not the only reason Jesus called the 12 together. What's the second reason? He also called them so he could send them out. In other words, that's mission. That's being a part of his mission. And being a part of his mission is just as important as being part of a spiritual family in order to grow. You know, if you have just one without the other, if you have spiritual family without mission, or if you're involved in mission but you're not a part of the spiritual family, do you know what? Your life is going to be stunted. Your spiritual life is going to be unsatisfying. It's going to be unfulfilling. It's going to be incomplete. Because you see, mission, just like fellowship, is part of the genetic code of growth and health. And ever since that very first cell that Jesus formed, it has been necessary that we are in family and that we are in mission, or else we don't carry the code and we're not going to be healthy and we're not going to grow and we're not going to experience God like we should. Now listen to me. If you get involved in mission but you don't have fellowship, you will burn out. But if you get involved in fellowship but you don't get involved in mission, you will stagnate. Now, how many people in this room have experienced either burnout or stagnation? Stagnation is when you're going to church, but you wonder why. It's just flat, it's empty, it's unsatisfying. You don't feel like you're growing. How many of you have experienced either burnout or stagnation in your life? Go ahead. God gave you hands. You can use them. Okay, a lot of us have, and this is one of the biggest reasons. You know, there's an awful lot of Christians that burn out in churches, but there's also an awful lot of Christians sitting in churches and they're stagnant and the church is stagnant. I've noticed that for most Christians, or many, it could be most, church is mostly about fellowship. It's mostly social. They go to see their friends. They go to have support. And they want to have it comfortable, and they want to have it easy, and they want everyone to know their name, and they want to be welcome when they walk on campus, and they want to feel like they, you know, like they're on the inside. But do you know something? That's great. But apart from a commitment to mission, that will become stale and empty and flat. Do you know that there's no such thing in God's eyes of simply being called to be blessed? Genesis 12, verse 1, we see the beginning of Israel in God's call to Abraham. This is the beginning of the Old Testament people of God, if you will, as God calls Abraham, and of course, all Israelites are his descendants. Now the Lord said to Abraham, "Go forth from your country and from your relatives and from your father's house to the land which I will show you." Verse 2, "And I will make you a great nation, and I will bless you." And everyone's all, yeah, I like to be blessed. "And I will make your name great." That sounds good. "So you shall be a blessing. I will bless you, and so you shall be a blessing." We are blessed so that we can be a blessing. And if we get blessed and we don't pass that blessing on, we short circuit it. Do you know that? We'll short circuit our blessings when we do not pass them on. The top line is that we get blessed. The bottom line is that therefore we can and must bless others. We get saved and we become instruments of salvation. To be a follower of Jesus means that we follow him into his mission. He came from earth in order that people might be saved, in order that his kingdom might grow. And to follow him means that mission is something that we get involved in. You cannot experience the fullness of Jesus and his love unless you become an instrument of passing on that love. You can't fully experience salvation unless you become an instrument of passing on salvation. You'll never be completely healed in your life until you become an instrument of healing. It's there in the genetic code. It's there in the prototype. So a question for every believer must be, what is my part in the mission? Where am I called to serve, to advance the cause of Christ? And when people are looking for a right church, they often are just thinking about the fellowship part of it. But equally important, we've got to ask, is this church advancing the mission? And is there a part for me to play in advancing the mission of Jesus Christ? And I'll just tell you, one great part about FCC is you know that there are 100 different places, ministries at least, to serve. This is a ministries overview. You can go on the website. You can see this. Just go on our website and hit programs, and you'll find it. We also have these at the visitor booth. It needs to be updated a little bit, but it's still good. But the point is that just like fellowship, you need to be involved in mission. So you can't be passive. You can't just say, well, you know, if somebody asks me, I'll think about it. No, you've got to take responsibility. You can't be a disciple unless you're proactive. You see, a disciple looks to whom they can bless. They look for someone to bless. A passive person just sits around and waits for someone to bless them. A disciple looks for ways to get involved. A passive person waits until somebody invites them. People say, well, if they need me, I guess they'll ask me to help. Can I ask how many of you got your job that way? You said, you know what? If they need workers, I'm in the white pages. And not only that, I go to Starbucks and read my paper every morning. And if they need workers, they can just walk up to me and go, excuse me, do you have a job? Because I'm looking for someone. No, none of us got our jobs that way. And I have a question for you. Is being employed in the cause of Christ any less important than being employed in a secular job? And you know, it's not. And people say, well, you know, I put my name in the offering basket and nobody called. You know, they called for workers. I put my name in. I didn't hear from anybody. Well, I don't know. Maybe they lost your name. Or more likely, because this is what happens all the time, they tried to reach you 3 or 4 times and couldn't. Or maybe they dropped the ball. Because I got a terrible secret to confess to you. The people in leadership of this church, you know, whether it's volunteer or staff, they are very imperfect people who are just trying to grow in Jesus like the rest of you. But the point is this. It doesn't matter because it's your responsibility to get involved in the mission. Just like it's your responsibility to get involved in spiritual family. Because you need it. And excuses don't matter, so we just need to do whatever it takes to get involved. We won't grow and experience the fullness of Christ unless we're carrying the genetic code to life and growth. Now, one way that we're going to talk about really quick, one way to get involved in the mission, not the only way, but one way, is by giving. And do you know that it is great to go to a church where you know your tithes and offerings are being used to advance the cause of Christ in the kingdom of God? That's a wonderful feeling. But how much better is it to know that you can make a direct sacrificial gift, a direct gift that will enable somebody to hear the gospel, that because of your gift, somebody will hear the gospel. And today is Mission Sundays, and we're going to talk about 3 exciting ways to give. We're going to show you 3 quick videos. We do this every year, where you can make a specific gift, usually $25 a month, and because of that gift, all of it will go and people will hear the gospel. The first video we're going to find is about our ministry in Guatemala. our after-school Bible clubs there that are reaching these kids and they're speaking to kids. And also a new component is that we are going to be helping a ministry of people right here in the church, the Merlots, that work with severely physically handicapped kids and their families. So let's watch the first video, and this is your first opportunity. If you want to give directly, you can give to this. Let's roll it.
I am so excited about what we're doing in Guatemala in partnership with Potter's Field Ministries to reach out to young people with the gospel. We're working with one church it's called the Old City. It's an independent, charismatic church that already had a heart to reach out to young people. Now we've come along the side of them. This is only the second Saturday that they've had it here. Last week they have 150. They're expecting more. Today they just keep drifting in here. And I just wanted to introduce you. This is Pastor Castellanos. He is the senior pastor's son. He's the youth pastor here. Just want you to know that we're excited about helping you. Reaching more children for Jesus.
Alcanzando más niños para Jesús.
Your $25 a month helps us not only to preach the gospel to these young people, but also helps us with tutoring. A lot of these kids are having trouble in school. Your $25 a month makes it possible for us to help tutor these kids to do well in school. Our club in Antigua has grown. It's several hundred kids, and we feed them when they come. We've only been in Guatemala for a little over a year. To see the growth already is very, very encouraging. I wanted to show you, you can see a tent behind me. And this is a tent that our church bought here in Antigua, Guatemala, so that when it rains, which it does quite often, that they can still have the Bible club here. Another exciting development, new development in Guatemala, is that Carlos and Nora Merlot, who are members of our church, have a ministry in Guatemala. They're both originally from there. And they have a ministry to the severely disabled, physically disabled children. And you want to tell me a little bit about that?
We started with 25 families, and now I think we are the total of 75 families.
You minister to 75 disabled children, and you figured out what they needed, and they need a lot of help.
We are usually in constant need of buying new wheelchairs for the kids. They are kids that they cannot move back and forth, so then we need to offer physical therapy, speech therapy.
Friends, these are severely handicapped kids that a lot of them lay in beds all day. My heart just broke, and so we're going to try to help sponsor as many of these 75 kids as we can. And so part of the Guatemala money that you help sponsor, that $25 a month, is going to go help these kids.
All right, so if you go on your bulletin, you'll see that we have Because of You, Lives Are Changed. And you can give a gift that suggests 25, but you can give any amount you want to one of those ministries. We're going to look at the second ministry, which is very exciting. It's our ministry in Cuba. We've been in Cuba for about 20 years. And let's go ahead and run this video. Now, because of the situation with Eric Cox, we didn't get to add a lot of the video of Cuba or any into this video. So, but let's go ahead and run it. I wish we had some of the actual on-site stuff in there for you to see, but a lot of good information here.
First, let me introduce who I'm sitting next to. Most of you know, this is Al Green, and this is Marty Wilson. We're going to talk about the Cuba ministry for just a minute here. And Al, about 20 years ago, you and I went to Cuba. We snuck into Cuba through Why are you smiling? We snuck in. We came in through Toronto, Canada, and at that time, how many churches were in Bethel?
Had 5 pastors and 8 churches total.
8 churches, and since we've been sponsoring pastors and working there all these years, about how many churches do they have now?
I'm allowed to say over 1,500.
Okay, you're allowed to say over 1,500, so there are more than that.
Yes.
Okay, and that's phenomenal growth, and our church has really been a big part of that.
Yes.
Marty, as you go out and visit the pastors, why don't you share with us how important that $25 a month is to these pastors?
The $25, what it allows the pastors to do is to dedicate most of their time to pastoring. Back there, the economy is really tough, and as a pastor, you get ostracized. You can't buy things at the same price. You can't work. Your kids are treated differently at school, and the $25 allows them to at least take the economic worries for a big part off of their plate and allow them to minister.
This has always been an incredible thing to me, and that is $25 makes an incredible difference in a pastor's life. And what I think will put things into perspective is a doctor in Cuba makes about $60 a month. Is that right?
About 30.
$30 a month. So you can see, guys, if when we support these pastors at $25 a month, we're really doing a big thing and helping them to start churches. Al, what do you think is probably the most significant event that's happened in Cuba with the pastors in the last few years?
Well, a few years ago, they decided that they were going to really go after growth. Mm-hmm. And if you can imagine this, in a period of about 2.5 years, they added 200 churches to their group. And just recently, the Lord, according to Emilio, he said, I just felt like being prompted that we're supposed to do that again. So they have set aside 5 districts in the whole country. What they're going to do is add 100 more for the next 5 years, so there'll be another 500 churches that have joined the group in that period of time.
And how many pastors are we supporting regularly? I know that it's at least 100, right?
100 is what we've been supporting for a solid period of 10 years. Never have we missed anything.
If our church is the only thing we did overseas, the only thing this church ever did in the last 20 years was what we have done in Cuba, we have done a substantial thing, correct?
Yes, and if you remember, just not too many years ago, a pastor stood on our pulpit here, excuse me, from Cuba, and told our audience, they said, we on our council consider Foothills to be responsible for about a 50% growth of all of the churches that they've got and people. So they gave credit to Foothills for being involved in all this.
Well, that's incredible. That's fantastic. And so this has been and will continue to be an important ministry of our church, but we need you to help. We need you to help us with that $25 a month to help sponsor pastors and continue the revival, help continue the revival that's going on in the island of Cuba.
Yes.
God bless you.
Okay, that's just amazing. This church has helped hundreds of churches get started down there, grow. We've done a pastors' conference every year. We've helped build churches, and we've set aside a lot of medical supplies. But most important is what you get to do. I mean, to me, it is amazing. This is a communist country. There's persecution against these pastors and their families in the churches. They're not allowed to get government jobs. And how many of you know in Cuba, they're all government jobs. It's socialism. So they basically shut these pastors down. And you and I are able to stand with one of these pastors and their families, help support them while they build and minister a church. Your family can do that. My family's done that for years. So that's an exciting thing to put down. We're going to look at the third and final, which is our youth venture program. I think most of you, unless you're new, you're familiar. We have 4 teen centers here in the East County that are open every day. We also are part of, we have 24 Bible clubs that in middle and high school that we operate. And let's take just a look at our Youth Venture video. You're going to meet some new kids you haven't met before. I'm here in the middle of our Youth Venture Broadway location. You know, perhaps you've heard some of the statistics about kids. Did you know that 50% of all people that ever accept Christ do so between the ages of 10 and 13? And that if someone graduates from high school without having given their life to Christ, there's only a 6% chance they ever will. You can see how important this age group is. However, the sad truth is that most young people in East County grow up without anyone telling them about Jesus. For thousands of young people, Youth Venture and our Higher Ground clubs are their best chance of learning about God's love for them. Over 90% of those who come have no church background. They tell us they've never been inside of a church, that they've never seen an open Bible. And each year, several thousand youth are powerfully and lovingly presented with the gospel through our many volunteers and workers.
My life before Youth Venture, I grew up in a very broken home. There was a lot of abuse. Like my mom, she let my brothers do drugs, and she let them do whatever they wanted, and they just like ran rampant in the town that we grew up in. And when I was 9 years old, my mom kind of snapped, and so I ran away with my sister. After that, my whole life sort of just, I felt really empty. I went to Youth Venture the end of my 7th grade year, and the leaders at Youth Venture just showed me like a love I'd never known, and they showed me what Christ's love was like. And because of Youth Venture, I've learned how to love people, and I've been able to step up in leadership. I'm a small group leader now.
Without Youth Venture, thousands of kids' lives would have turned out differently. Youth Venture literally altered the course of their lives.
Growing up, I felt abandoned. I felt like no one will ever be there for me. In middle school, I was drinking, I was smoking, I was cussing a lot. I wasn't being like a good kid, you know. I started coming to Youth Venture 6th or 7th grade. And when I came here, I just felt like an instant connection. Like I could come here and like have a home, you know, like a second home. Youth Venture like opened up like great doors, like nice big doors to new people and to church and to God. Like just really came into my life and shook it. I had a reality check, and then I found the Lord, and He has been my Lord and Savior ever since.
Youth Venture is a lifesaver and a difference maker. One of our youth recently wrote, quote, "The day I walked into Youth Venture is the day that saved my life."
One day, my mom started working at the H&R Block across the street, and I started coming to Youth Venture, and by that time I was already just ready to give up and end my life. And then, you know, through Youth Venture I was invited to go to that strength team. Thank God it was in that time period. And God touched me there, and I no longer felt the need to commit suicide, and then that kind of set me on a path considering the fact that there is actually a higher power and a God that cares about me and that really wanted to help me and fix my life.
I just love this place a lot. Playing the Wii, playing the Xbox, it's really fun.
I just like being able to ride the ramps and stuff, and I think it's really cool that everyone's here, just volunteer. They help all of us.
When I get lessons, I learn more about God. That's why I come here.
I really like to be around all my friends here. It's like a second home to me.
People ask me, how would you describe Youth Venture? Well, is it a youth center? Is it a game center? Is it a teen center? I think there's only one word to use for Youth Venture, and it's the ones that the kids always use. Youth Venture is a family. Youth Venture is made up of 3 types of people: those who give to support it, those who volunteer and serve there, and the kids who go there. Thank you for helping this family that gives hope to so many. You know, I just have to say, I think it's almost miraculous what you guys have been able to accomplish through your volunteering and supporting of Youth Venture. There have been teen centers that have sprung up based on this model across America. They're using our material. People have gone out from this church, opened a teen center in Alpine, opened one in Ensenada. As you guys know, we have 9,000 this year going to youth venture clubs in Kenya. Next year they expect 17,000. The clubs are done actually in the schools there. The materials have been translated now into Spanish. And Mike Van Meter and Nathan Cornett took they had a youth conference in Cuba, 700 kids and youth leaders. They were able to give 100 youth leaders the youth venture materials. It's gone into Guatemala now and Mexico. And what an amazing thing. You know, sometimes I was thinking the other day about Foothills, and I thought, you know, Foothills is like an ant. How many of you guys have heard that an ant can carry 20 times its own body weight? And I think, you know, we're not a small church, but there's a lot of churches a lot bigger. But I think what we accomplish, the thousands of lives, tens of thousands of lives we've impacted in Cuba, in Kenya. You know, I just told you we got 7,000 books out already, and we're going to have 12,000. And I was doing a little thinking last year about some of our super high impact ministries to young people. And of course, you think of Future Quest, you think about our camps, you think about Vacation Bible School. These are long-term, high impact. And you know, we had, and also the crusade we did last year, Strength Team. And you know, between all of those, we had 10,000 registered in all of those. So it is no exaggeration to say that you guys are impacting tens upon tens of thousands of people around the world. And that is what you support by supporting this church. And God's calling each one of us to be a part of His ministry. It's not just giving of money, it's giving of time. God has a place for you. Everybody's important. And we think it's terrible when we have an unemployment rate of 6 or 7% in our nation. I want to tell you, the saddest thing is the unemployment rate in the church. Because all of you have gifts. All of you are necessary. And God wants to give you the full Christian life as you step into ministry.